You know the drill, this is where you come to get all the very latest watch news fed right into your eye holes. And we've got some absolute bangers this time, including an incredibly rare Rolex that changed the entirety of watchmaking that, in true influencer style, I've saved until right at the very end. Let's do our watches. You know an up-and-coming watchmaker's going to be good when even their name is complicated to understand. This is Dann Phimphrachanh, and that's Dan with two N's, and what I think is pronounced Phimphrachanh spelt Phimphrachanh, and he wins at Scrabble every single time. Even the Welsh don't know what to do with him. He knows what to do with him, however, and that's making watches. Currently, he's working on the Seconde Vive, a 39.5mm deadbeat seconds watch in stainless steel, whose second hand ticks like a quartz. Now, hang on a minute. You might be thinking if your anal glands are squelching especially well today. Vive means live, and dead means, well, dead. So what's going on? It's true, the deadbeat or jumping seconds is so called because it appears completely lifeless between ticks, where a typical seconds hand on a mechanical watch continually sweeps around the dial in a very undead way. Dan remedied this situation with a mechanism of his own design that surrounds the deadbeat seconds with constantly moving parts to bring it back to life, so to speak, to give it horological CPR, hence the name. A modern legend in watchmaking with waitlists so long they ask you for a next of kin, Kari Voutilainen's efforts are ubiquitous in the industry. Not only under the brand of his very own name, but through his dial, case and métier d'art companies as well, who supply some of the very best with their wares. For his own watches, it increasingly seems the vanilla stuff just isn't doing it for Kari anymore. And so he's sought more unusual tastes from the archives of Japanese creativity, as we all do. This is the Voutilainen 28 Kohan, a collaboration with Kitamura Studio for a big dollop of urushi lacquer right on the maki. The watch, a one-off, has been created for a Finnish collector, and so the dial depicts a view over Finland's Lake Sim. That's not the only nod to the Finns' home on the Kohan, Japanese for lakeside by the way, with the national flower and national butterfly depicted inside the officer's caseback. For those with better eyesight and knowledge of Finnish culture, there's a tiny map of the nation of Finland and a bear paw print, Finland's national animal, engraved into the caseback, plus the crown is set with granite, Finland's national stone. The outermost caseback depicts two 7-spotted ladybirds, the national insect of Finland, representing the collector and their partner. There's even a little Vichy water bottle for the power reserve, which I can only assume is Finland's national Spanish water company of choice. We previously saw Albishorn's use of two sagging subdials in the Thundergraph, an explorer's watch intended for use on snowy mountainsides. And now it's back for a more aerial edition, the 3,950 Swiss franc Type 10 Classic. This time the brand is drawing inspiration from the pilot's watches of the late 40s, early 50s, with a black and cream coloration that hasn't looked this tasty since Oreos. Even if you're familiar with chronographs, there's a little bit extra within the 39mm 12mm thick steel case here, which is incidentally water resistant to 100 meters should you be a particularly bad pilot. What looks to be a pusher top left is actually the crown, which goes about its crownly duties up there to bring the running seconds of the modified Valjoux manually wound chronograph round to 4:30. That places the chronograph minutes at 7:30, and of course the chronograph seconds stay in the centre. Activating it is done via the alarmingly red button just below the crown, of which you'll note is not paired with a twin sibling. That's because this is a mono pusher where start, stop and reset are cycled through all in one place. In addition to the backup timing bezel is a chronograph indicator just above the logo, although the purpose of this one is up there with Jenga on the International Space Station. It's white when the chronograph is stopped or reset, which when reset can't even be seen because the loom plot on the chronograph seconds hand covers it up, and red when it's running. In theory, that's great, but in practice, you know when it's running because it's running. The approach Armin Strom has taken to watchmaking is very much present day, a show of glimmering steel that paints a picture of what modern watchmaking might have been like, had quartz not come along and pooed in the punch bowl. Inversely, Armin Strom have also wondered what its contemporary take might have been like if it had made watches alongside OGs like Christian Huygens, discoverer of resonance. And with the mirrored force resonant Zeitgeist 1665, it's back to the time of the bubonic plague to find out. The principle of the mirrored force resonance remains much the same as previous editions, using a flexible interconnecting component designed specifically to get under the skin of Phimphrachanh. Much the hot topic of discussion amongst watch collectors, with GCSEs in physics no less, the nature of true resonance has indeed been confirmed for the Armin Strom. But then, you can't trust actual scientists with PhDs in science because they've been corrupted by knowledge. As always, the real truth is to be found on Reddit from user Buttsplash69. Whichever reality you choose to substitute, Armin Strom will serve it on your wrist with a pale pinkish backdrop of frosted metal upon which two heat-blued Breguet-style hands sit. The area in which resonance does or doesn't happen, depending on your belief, has been opened up to be completely transparent, revealing, at least on my wrist, exactly the same pale pinkish colour, but just a bit hairier. Just 25 pieces of this edition will be made at 82,000 Swiss francs a pop. It's a double header for H. Moser this time, with the first instalment in collaboration with Azuki, whose own brand platform is self-described as an intersection of art, technology and internet culture that started as a Web3 project. I think that means they sell digital snake oil, aka NFTs. I'm very much out of my depth on that particular topic, but what I can tell you is that it's resulted in 4 very much fungible dial styles for the Pioneer in both $25,000 center seconds and $75,000 tourbillon form: fire, earth, water and lightning. These themes are reflected not only in colour but texture as well, each with a different guilloche pattern that corresponds appropriately. So the fire dial looks fiery, the earth dial looks earthy, and well, you get the picture. Each tourbillon model is unique, with the center seconds limited to 24 pieces each. Unusually, each watch is made in 40mm of titanium, slightly smaller, and is fitted with a 60-minute turning bezel. And of course, being a Pioneer, it's water resistant to 120 meters. Formula One driver Pierre Gasly is finally showing us he's got a pair with a new duo of watches in collaboration with team sponsor Moser for the second release in these here Twin Peaks. Likened by Pierre to a leather jacket, or the colour of his underpants after Spain in 2018, the chocolate fume dial is set with a tourbillon within a rose gold Streamliner case. This edition is either paired with a matching brown rubber strap for a 79,000 Swiss franc 100-piece limited edition, or a full gold-on-gold bracelet for just 10 pieces at 125,000 Swiss francs each. This intensely gold version also gets a ruby marker at 10 that represents not only Gasly's driver number, but also how many seconds off the pace Alpine expect to be in 2026. The Caliber HMC 805's tourbillon is treated to a pairing of its own, a double hairspring setup that requires 2 identically performing springs to provide an even beat whichever way the tourbillon is facing. Some might call it overkill, but for Moser, it's just another day in the office. Another twin pairing comes from a brand more towards the other end of the pricing scale, Lebois Co, whose heritage chronograph gets a helping of the hot stuff for the coquille d'œuf, which translates to eggshell. That's not because the watch has been painted with a layer of Dulux's finest, but because of the off-white colour applied by the guys and gals at Dann. For the uninitiated, Dann is a traditional enameller owned by Dann, who produce artistry of the most frustrating order, not just for the freaky watchmaker, but for other clients as well, many of them very well known. Lebois Co is now one of them. Why is enamelling frustrating? Because making an enamel dial is even harder than space Jenga, with each of the many layers painstakingly hand-applied over the course of its creation liable to crack when blasted in the 800-degree furnace. 800 degrees in Celsius or Fahrenheit. Doesn't matter, you wouldn't want to put your hand in either. The manually wound Lebois powered watch is an exploration of craftsmanship that doesn't come cheap. When the dial is made by the same people, and even with the same colour, used by a brand that rhymes with Schmatek Schmilip, It's going to add a bit of spice to the price. In this case, the 25-piece annual production will cost €9,800. I think you'll agree that €2,200 is less than €9,800, and so to soften the blow, Lebois Co have also brought unto the world the Heritage Small Seconds, taking the design origins of the Heritage Chronograph and, well, ditching the Chronograph. Bringing the beat is a high-grade Sellita SW300 whose slim profile keeps the Heritage Small Seconds case just 8mm thick without sacrificing automatic winding. That balances the 37.8mm diameter steel case for a more vintage wear, as clearly intended by the classic dial designs in baton, numeral and script variations in blue, black and silver. The initial run will be 100 pieces and will come with both a leather strap and Fixoflex stretch bracelet, perfect for post-Christmas dinner bloating. If you're looking for a watch classier than a badger's top hat, this might be the one for you. It's long been understood that Apple's watch is a design up there with the best, just unfortunately filled with a glorified calculator instead of mechanical goodness. That was rectified by Moser with the Swiss Alp watch and has now been turned up to 11 o'clock by Chinese watchmaker Barren. In collaboration with steampunk extraordinaire Vianney Halter, the Master Collection KWH reimagines the Apple Watch in a world where a silicon chip is nothing but a particularly unappetizing snack. Inspired by a mechanical electricity meter from Vianney Halter's personal collection of things he's been meaning to throw out but hasn't quite got round to, the KWH reports hours by means of a chain driven around the perimeter and a minute drum around 4 o'clock. There's also a day-night indicator opposite the minutes, plus a date and moon phase on the reverse, adjusted by the bullhead pusher arrangement at the top of the case. The case itself takes a bite out of Apple's lunch with the rounded rectangular shape in 35 by 41mm of 18-karat white gold. Price also takes a leaf out of Apple's tree at a costly $44,000. I very much hope you're enjoying these hot new releases so far. If you are, please like, comment and subscribe to show the love. If there's some excess love left over, my merch store is linked in the description where you'll find a bunch of fun AMW stuff. The ultra best are my wonderful Patreons who join me for extra content and conversation on watches over on Patreon. There's a link for that in the description too. Thank you. It's here, the ultimate daily sports watch that'll do it all, the ultimate go anywhere, do anyone timekeeper, the Cartier Santos to Cartier Titanium. On paper, there's little more to say than it's the Santos, but now in titanium, but in practice, it's so much more than that. Remember when everyone shit the bed over Rolex's Titanium Yachtmaster? Well, this is like that, but in a tuxedo. If this watch were a film, it would be Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, but directed by Guy Ritchie and starring Daniel Craig and Jason Statham. It's Prince Charles with a face tattoo, Tom Ford with knuckle dusters. Just like the Yachtmaster, the industrial finish of titanium pairs unexpectedly well with delicate elegance, an effect that's emphasized even more in the Santos. A big plus is that this version gets its flat bezel held in place by 8 screws in a brushed finish instead of mirrored, making it much less susceptible to blemishes. Perfect for when you're slamming some guy's head in a car door. Water resistance is maintained at a practical 100 meters and proportions stay classy at 39.8mm across and 9.38mm thick. The only downside is the $11,500 price tag. It's been 50 years since Girard-Perregaux chose between octagonal cake or death, begrudgingly adopting the popular integrated case into its collection in 1975, in order not to be wiped from the face of watchmaking. Unusually, however, that original Laureato bucked trends by slipping a high-quality quartz caliber into its backside. The one that set the standard for every other quartz caliber to come with a 32,768Hz frequency. Half a century on, however, and priorities have changed, and so it's with a brand new movement, the caliber GP4800, they start this new era afresh. The anniversary Laureato 50 is all about evolutionary change, dotting I's and crossing T's to make it the slickest iteration yet. The GP lettermark logo at 12 is gone, the hands and markers reprofiled to be slimmer and more elegant. Dial text is generally reduced overall, so owners of a lower reading age can also enjoy it. The caliber GP 4800 sports a strapping great balance bridge inspired by the company's 3 Bridges collection, mirrored by the supporting arms of the gold rotorweight. This keeps the bimetal 39mm watch less than a centimetre thick, despite 150 metres of usable water resistance. 200 pieces will be made available for €28,100 each. Ben Chi of Celadon High Horology has committed himself to demonstrating there's more to China than Peking duck and electric cars, with a series of artisanal pieces rendered in delicious cloisonné enamel. For those not in the enamel know, cloisonné is the use of fine gold wire to ring fence off different sections of enamel from each other, to create an illustration or motif not possible with just enamel alone. For anyone who's aware of enamelling, which should be all of you if you were paying attention earlier, it involves layering high heat-treated glass paste until the work is either done or cracks and gets thrown in the bin. It's a frustrating art because the failure rate is just so high. Cloisonné is like that, but worse, with a whole bunch of extra painstaking artistry front-loaded before rolling the dice and seeing if it survives an 800-degree furnace. Typically, Celadon has embraced traditional artistry with its cloisonné pieces, either inspired by enamel work from ancient watchmakers or artwork from Chinese dynasties gone by. But for the porcelain dunes and cascading cubes, a more contemporary approach has been taken. Geometric structures, both sweeping and angled, bring a modern, summer-fresh chic to the antiquated art form, which is available in the time-only configuration you see here with the hands tipped in heat bluing, or also in the jump hour configuration offered by Celadon. One advantage to celebrating Chinese culture is not only getting New Year's twice, it's also being able to enjoy artistry on a Chinese budget. Despite the execution of the dial being reassuringly high, these cloisonné creations won't be asking heinous requests of your bank manager that could rival the purchase of property, instead coming in at around the price of a stainless steel Daytona instead. After the iconically bonkers Project 01, Kolloquium have decided to take the concept up a level quite literally with the Project 02, where the original edition filled the dial with different scale pins, all daubed with luminous paint to create a pixelated depth map. This one adds extra resolution to take a much more topographical approach. There are 9 layers and 64 dial components total, which, when assembled correctly, draw out the hours with contour lines emanating from the dial's base. For the watchmaker assembling it, it's the worst thing since the IKEA flat pack, but at a microscopic scale. Relief is very much a misnomer when it comes to the frustrations of production. The result is astonishing, however, a view never before seen in watchmaking in all its centuries of existence. Adding further dimension to this view of Bikini Bottom is the application of lume on just about everything, giving a nighttime experience that James Cameron probably sees every time he shuts his eyes. The case has also been reprofiled to allow even more side-eye action, the 9 layers clearly on display through the box crystal's side. The entry fee to go on this adventure is 3,333 Swiss francs and 33 centimes. Sometimes known as Poseidon's Kiss, the Arsham splash is typically when a droplet of toilet water is sent in return to a direct bullseye. It's also the name chosen for the latest collaboration piece between Hublot and artist Daniel Arsham, who first joined forces for the Arsham Droplet pocket watch. This one, the MP17 Mecha 10, is more wrist-friendly, taking Arsham's liquid lines in sapphire and titanium and making them a more wearable 42mm. A similar movement, the Mecha 10, with 10 days of hand-wound operation, resides inside this frosty snowball, whose asymmetric view through the dial reminds me that I need to defrost my freezer. Say what you will about Hublot, but I commend and even appreciate this kind of out-of-the-freezer box thinking. It's different, it's interesting, it's unusual, and it's unique, and I don't long for spring to see it thaw away to nothing. Granted, it's also £57,000, but I can assure you that not a single penny of that spend has gone my way to assuage my opinion. Our next entry is less of a wristwatch and more of what's used to define it as such, a strap. Once considered effeminate and degrading, a strap used to wear a watch on one's wrist is now the most convenient method of keeping the time to hand. And Ming, ever the left-field thinkers, believe they've completely reinvented it. Called the Polymesh, this 1,500 Swiss franc 3D printed titanium bracelet looks, at first glance, like just another mesh. It's a bit more interesting than that, however. Not only is it printed in one single piece, including the clasp, it also has a level of flexibility to it that's unlike anything ever seen before. It doesn't bend or fold, it pours like a pool of tears from a Hublot owner after depreciation kicks in. Ming went through countless geometries with it to get the right flexion across both longitudinal and latitudinal planes, by which I mean they fiddled with it a lot so it wasn't like trying to strap a wet noodle onto your wrist. The net result is like a lightweight second skin that's even more comfortable than leather, which is impressive, because leather is quite literally a second skin. Timing things on Earth is pretty old hat now. It's been done. So for the UR10 space meter, Urwerk's decided astronomical measures of time are a bit more forward-thinking. At least they will be when wealthy owners of this 70,000 Swiss franc wristwatch ship out to Mars, leaving the burning wreckage of Earth behind. For your pleasure, and in addition to ordinary Earth hours and Earth minutes, to be clear, is an Earth rotation scale over 10 kilometers and 1,000 kilometers, and an Earth revolution scale over 1,000 kilometers and 64,000 kilometers. Perfect for remembering where you parked your space shuttle when you returned back to the Blue Marble to pick up your post. How is any of this useful to the average human? The answer? Get a Timex, bro. This is Urwerk, and it's designed for people who are done with needing things and have upgraded to just wanting things. It's as useful as a left-handed glove shop, but confusingly, that makes it cool. I don't know why. I don't make the rules. Omega wouldn't be Omega-ing without adding a whole bunch of minor variations to its watch collection, and this time it's done that specifically for the dark side of the moon. This level of minutiae brings wonderfully conflicting naming conventions like the inclusion of a grey side of the moon within the dark side of the moon collection, which exists completely independently of the Moonwatch. Figure that out. New editions of the fully murked out automatic dark side are a little slimmer, as is its side piece edition with a manual caliber and red dial accents. Then there's one with silver hands and markers for people who intend on, actually using it as a watch. And lastly, there's the grey side, which commemorates the appropriately mundane Jim Lovell quote, "The moon is essentially grey," an insight well worth sending him the 384,400 kilometers for. The grey side is essentially a tune-up of the Apollo 8 edition, the semi-skeletonized dial riddled with craters in homage to our rocky neighbour, or the state of the road surfaces on the A20. This one loses the Saturn V second-hand, however, making do with a more ordinary indicator. It comes as a nice excuse for Omega to nudge up prices once more, with the cheapest retailing at £13,100. For when everything else bores you, Hordlands is here to be the final piece in your collection, the final boss if you like, and now also for those whose wrists couldn't plug a sewer. This is the Sphere Series 3, which retains the mystical Magic 8-ball display but somehow squeezes it into a 37x45mm grade 5 titanium case. It's one of the most interesting and innovative non-standard complications out there, and now it can be enjoyed by those whose surname isn't Van Damme. How it works is that the minutes follow a retrograde display on the right-hand side, and the ball on the left spins to a new hour after every complete trip of the minutes from 0 to 60. How that ball works is, I can only assume, through a pact with the devil, because I fail to understand how it can be done mechanically. Limited to 28 pieces, the heat-treated voodoo ball gets a unique purple coloration to match the strap made from what I think is recycled hotel towel. Surprisingly, there's 72 hours of power reserve in there as well, plus 100 meters of water resistance, should you feel your dives could be made a bit more interesting by wearing a 69,000 Swiss franc watch at the same time. A tale of greatness gone unrecognised. Moritz Grossman is once again quietly showing everyone else how it's done, with the Tourbillon Titan and Tremblage. The Titan is fashioned in titanium, a regulated display that steps aside for a tourbillon the size of a planet. It's dripping with a contemporary colour scheme accented with the brand's heat-treated purple hardware and clear bearing jewels, and is yours for the eye-watering sum of €197,200. The €200 is important, probably. Alongside it is a more classic edition in white gold with salmon tremblage dial. Tremblage isn't French for Parkinson's, it's an engraving technique used by artisan watchmakers to create a randomized texture by shaking. The net result is a €247,400 Ferrero Rocher wrapper in a watch, in the very best way. You know how some people are like, it's still my birthday weekend, because they're trying to get out of doing the dishwasher or something? Yeah, well, that's Breguet. Breguet is still 250 this year, and so it's got 3 more new watches to celebrate: the 7235, the 7225, and the 9935. The first, the 39mm 7235, puts a classic phase de lune arrangement inside the updated case, first seen with the subscription. For a watch so achingly beautiful that knowing I won't have it makes my heart ache with sadness more than watching Marley and me in the vet's waiting room on the day they put my childhood dog down. Next up is the 41mm 7225, based on a classic Breguet pocket watch built in 1802 with an independently resettable second subdial top left that's mirrored here on this modern edition, alongside a method-dicted Thomas the Tank Engine dial layout. Not even once. In the back, however, is a caliber engraved like a telephone notepad that hides an impressively technical secret. Revived for this watch is a balance that beats 20 times a second, twice as fast as an El Primero, that's accurate to just 1 second a day. How? As with all things I don't understand, I give credit to magnets, only this time, it's true. A floating balance staff means no friction, so a faster beat with more accuracy can be achieved. We all know that old Abraham Louis Breguet never forgets a dame, so that's why the 9935 Reine de Naples, fashioned after the first wristwatch ever made, is also here with diamond and sapphire markers, mother of pearl dial, and an aventurine moonphase display. Every watch here from Breguet is a banger, along with pretty much all of the other 250th anniversary releases. Is this the great comeback of the notorious ALB? I promised you an absolute barnstormer for our last entry, a Rolex so rare it makes Tutankhamun's toenails positively pedestrian. I mean, he's got 10 of those and there's only one of these. Up for auction at Sotheby's is a one-of-a-kind watch that changed Rolex's fortunes forever. You know those pictures of swimmer Mercedes Gleitz, who attempted to swim the English Channel wearing a watch that Rolex would boast the very next day in a full front-page newspaper advert to be the beginning of a new era? Well, Sotheby's are selling that exact watch. That's like owning Jordan's first pair of Nikes or Jeffrey Epstein's Rolodex. From 1927, and all in gold, since stainless steel wasn't quite there yet. And engraved on the back for Mercedes by Rolex, it's not only the watch she wore for the swim, but the one she continued to wear in lieu of anything else Rolex offered her for her time as a Rolex ambassador. It cannot be stated just how much of a turning point this moment was for Rolex as a brand, setting in motion an ideal that would become the benchmark of the Rolex ethos, providing hard-wearing, work-resistant watches to professionals at the very top of their field. And this one could be yours. Just kidding, Rolex will buy it for way more than you could ever afford. And don't forget, buying a Rolex is a lot like taking a shit. It's hard to do without having your pants pulled down. Goodbye.